I wouldn't say I get very starstruck. Just like seeing them as humans and understanding that they have very similar challenges that we have. Even someone like Connor McDavid, I've known him since he was 14. Amazing individual, and I can't say enough great things about him. I mean, if The Rock came in, I would be like, yeah, but I have not met The Rock yet.
All right, Rock, if you're listening, nutrition, sleep, exercise, but being lonely is arguably the biggest factor.
100%. I deal with so many athletes and so many people with injuries or illnesses, or even just myself coming back from like postpartum. Mind-body connection. I know that sounds so cliche. Like, it is real.
What's one challenge you've had to overcome recently?
The biggest challenge I've had to overcome has been
Sylvie, your passion for helping others, your dedication to your craft, your easygoing yet dialed in personality make you so inspiring. Thank you for being on the Impact Community Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is truly an honor.
Well, I'm excited for our conversation. I find one of the biggest gifts in life is to find your purpose, to have a passion. I know how much pride you take in your career and you truly love what you do. Can you tell the Impact community a little bit more about what you're doing these days?
Yes. So aside from newly becoming a mom, I have a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old. I am a nutrition coach. I started off in strength and conditioning. That was my original, I guess, first love, first passion. And it really grew from there. I have had a lot of background in sport and fitness, but really what I do is I coach every day, and I work with people and help them be a high performer in their life. And I know that term is very used these days, but I really do work in high performance. I work with professional athletes, but I also work with everyday people who want to perform in their life through nutrition coaching. It used to be training coaching. I have stepped away from that, but really looking at their lifestyle and how I can help them improve and perform in their life every day.
Awesome. I know you're a proud East Coaster.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a story from your childhood that you think helped shape these passions you have today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Nova Scotia, Wolfville, Nova Scotia to be exact. So the home of Acadia University, very small town. I am very proud to be there. I actually just did a road trip with my 2 little ones and husband to go back home for Thanksgiving. And the big thing that sticks out for me, and I talk about this all the time, is we visited farmers markets every weekend. The area that I'm from is full of them. There's farms everywhere. You got the fish that you wanted off the back of a truck that came in that day from the ocean. So there was a connection to food that I didn't realize shaped how I view and how I approach my coaching today with my nutrition clients. So I was very fortunate. Obviously, we still went to grocery stores and, there were processed food in there and there was Tim Hortons and the things that you do in small towns. But the root was understanding that food came from places like farms and understanding that, it's a lifestyle to live it that way. And I was really privileged as a young girl to be able to go to farmers markets and get fresh food and understand that food comes from those places. And I realized when I got into nutrition coaching that wasn't as common as I thought it was growing up in that area. So I feel very fortunate.
That is so cool. I found as I've gotten older myself, knowing where your food comes from is, one of the biggest joys I have now. And the simplicity of going to a farmer's market or, at Impact, working with some local suppliers, like it makes the food taste better. It makes you feel like you're nourishing your body more. It's something that, I wish all of us could experience.
Yeah. And, obviously even in urban centers, you're able to find that. And I definitely did that when I came to Toronto. I know all the farmers markets and, made that part of my lifestyle. But yeah, it's so easy and so convenient to just get everything from the grocery store. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, I think when you talk to farmers, when you understand where your food comes from, and as much as you get involved in the process, it just makes it so much more nourishing in all ways.
Was sport a part of your life, being in such a sports dominated world today? Like, did you grow up an athlete, or was that something that just kind of developed in your coaching side of your world?
Yes, I did absolutely everything. I was a figure skater. That was probably my first passion, my first sport. There was not girls hockey growing up. I mentioned this to you before, but it was not like it is now. I probably would have played, but I figure skated. I played rugby, soccer, volleyball, all at different seasons because you could do that back in the day. So I focused on a lot of different sports, and I think it really shaped who I was. I was fortunate to play rugby at university as well. Unfortunately, and this is where my story begins with the path that I chose, I was very injured and I did not get the opportunity to play at the high levels in university that I wanted to because I kept on having injuries. And I had injuries as, growing up, as long as I can remember. I had these pivotal moments, whether it was my back or my knees, my shoulder, you name it. I had so many injuries. And a lot of that came back to how I was recovering and what I was focusing on with my nutrition and the lack of training that I was doing as a young kid. And instead, not that there's anything wrong with running, but I was just focusing on things like that because that's all we knew. We didn't focus on things like strength training until I got to university. And then I realized when we had to do fitness testing for my rugby team and I hung from the bar, doing pull up, or they asked me to do a pull up. I did not do a pull up. I don't even think there was any activation there. I realized that, I needed to get stronger. And that's sort of where my whole journey into strength training and then obviously nutrition coaching started.
I resonate with the injuries. When I was in high school, my nickname was OHIP because I had so many sports injuries as well.
What was your major one?
Knees, elbows, let's not get into that.
I know, but still.
No, so I think a lot of people probably look up to you now in terms of where you're at in your career, hearing how passionate you were on the food side of things and the sports side of things. From an educational standpoint, can you talk us through what you studied in university and then also kind of probably what's evolved after that to get to the point where you're at today?
Yeah. So thank you so much for saying that. I still feel like I'm learning so much and constantly a student. So I started off going the conventional route thinking I was going to be a physiotherapist, getting into kinesiology. So I started off at the University of New Brunswick, getting a kin degree. And that's where I found my passion for strength and conditioning. So from there, I went and got my CSCS, which is what you did at the time to become a trainer to hopefully work with athletes one day. So I got that certification right out of university. Unfortunately, in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, where I went to school, there were no professional athletes. So I had to look elsewhere in terms of a career. I moved to Toronto and I pursued a ton of different certifications. I went back to school for sports nutrition. I went down the functional diagnostic nutrition route. So, understanding things like blood work and hormone testing and gut testing. I have a slew of courses and certifications at this point, post-secondary courses in exercise physiology. So my path was kind of unconventional in the sense that I didn't go the registered dietitian route. I really stuck to my strength training background and used my expertise in exercise physiology to understand biochemistry and nutrition. So I would say a lot of it is self-taught. I have a ton of certifications that I won't bore you with because they're all just letters, and I'm still doing those things. But a lot of it came from obviously the hands-on work that I did and coach. So everything that I do for my nutrition business comes from strength and conditioning background. So for example, my programs are all focused on phased coaching, which you do. Periodization is a term in training where you go through different phases with athletes of training. And so my nutrition coaching is the exact same as that. So I follow those principles. I understand what they're doing for their training and their lifestyle, as opposed to just looking at, we do a nutrition consult, I give you some things, and then here we go. So I guess that answers your question in sort of the path I'm still learning. But in terms of certifications, like I said, sports nutritionist, functional diagnostic practitioner, and the background in exercise phys and strength and conditioning.
Well, I love the still learning component of that. I think in nutrition, sports and conditioning, we'll hopefully all still be learning for our entire careers as it's such an evolving science. One thing I found in my background as a strength coach and nutritionist is there's the courses, the certifications, degrees, but then there's mentorship and learning on the job that are equally as valuable.
Absolutely.
I know you've had some awesome mentors in your career. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about maybe who they were and kind of what you learned from some of these amazing people you've worked with?
I guess when I first started with strength and conditioning, I did have mentors, Gary Roberts, obviously being one of the big ones that we'll get into our partnership and relationship that has grown since there. But I started off looking at, Charles Poliquin, for example, I looked like I did his biosig course for like body fat back in the day. This is really aging me, but
Same here, same here.
I started off getting into that. I did a lot of like the testing protocols and strength and conditioning. So I was really into the transition from testing an athlete to writing programs, that sort of thing. And then in terms of nutrition, I followed a bunch of people, but I didn't have a specific mentor. And this is why it's so important for me to give back now, and why I take on so many interns and try to give back, is I didn't have anyone in the beginning that I felt was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And that was merging, performance and, eating real food and treating athletes like people, as opposed to just these performing robots, I guess, in a lot of ways, where their job is just to perform. So I wanted to merge health and performance. And so that's a major conversation now. And there's so many amazing people out there saying that now. But when I started, it really wasn't a lot of a conversation. And why I really gravitated towards Gary Roberts, and why, I basically walked in and told him that he was going to hire me, which is another story. But I loved his resilience and how he came back from an injury, and how he was able to apply these things that really, there was a light bulb that went off for me in terms of all these injuries and what he had been through. He had been through a major neck injury, and, came back and was able to basically come back after they didn't think that he was going to come back. And so, that was a huge turning point for me when I saw, firsthand what it was like to apply hard work and nutrition principles and look at your lifestyle. And he lived and breathed it. And so I would say, in the beginning, he and still was a major mentor
It's a great segue, because I'm curious. I don't know the story of how that partnership came to be, or even how you kind of got in with Gary.
Yeah.
Obviously him being a big name in the strength and conditioning nutrition world. Can you tell us about, how that first came to be?
Yeah. So when I first moved to Toronto, I was not working in sport at all. I actually worked at Extreme Fitness. If people know them, back in the day, I had my CSCS, wanted to train athletes, but didn't really know how to get in and do those things. So I started off, I actually moved up and was the director of the whole health center. So I was actually managing 20 personal trainers at 23 years old, which was crazy at the time. I felt like that taught me a lot, but I actually quit that with no backup plan. I actually was planning on working at Starbucks. It's like, they have amazing, I was making great money, but I was like, they have amazing benefits. I'll just work there. And then a colleague of mine said, well, I know you have your CSCS, you've always wanted to work in sport. I've heard of this ex-NHL player who's opening a high performance center. And was in Fitness Institute originally. So this was North Toronto in the East End. And I was like, okay, I'll, show up. And basically I showed up, and he kind of told me, and he didn't mean this in an offensive way. It was just a locker room at the time. Yeah. So he told me he hadn't hired a female strength coach in that position. And I basically said, give me the opportunity, I'll do whatever you want. So basically I shadowed Lauren Goldenberg, who is a strength coach that I looked up to and was an early mentor as well.
Yeah, legend.
Yes, he is. And so I basically was so annoying. I followed him around and saw what he did. He was doing all the program for the athletes at the time, and followed him around, followed Gary around. And one thing that I did, and I've been asked this question before about people who want to get into this path and where do they start? And the big thing is I just made myself useful. So what I mean by that is I found something, and the biosig was an area where I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do the body fats. I'm going to get really good at doing calipers and do the body composition for the athletes. I'm also going to get really good at testing. So I mentioned, the functional movement screen was the big thing back in the day. Do you remember that? It was So I got dialed in on the testing. And so I found an area where I could be useful as a strength coach that I felt was, wasn't being handled in that business. So I basically went to Gary, and I just didn't go away. I basically developed a position for myself. Obviously I earned it in a lot of ways because I, learned a lot in the process. I made a lot of mistakes, but I basically told him that he was going to hire me and that I was going to be the female strength coach in the room. So.
Well, I love that story. And it's such a good lesson, though, for anyone coming up in their career, whether they're entrepreneurship or trying to climb the corporate ladder. Sometimes you just need to show up and make yourself useful. that's like the
The number
ultimate
one
takeaway
thing.
right there. Like
Yeah.
it's such a smart approach you took. And
I
it's paid.
still do the body fat to this day,
Well,
by the
that's
way. And
great.
also, I didn't mention I was the shake girl too. I made a
Okay.
lot of
All right.
shakes.
All right.
I made a lot of shakes, and I actually still did that when we opened the gym, which we'll get into. I actually had to be the shake girl in the beginning because we didn't have anyone else, and all the players who saw us in the original days were like, "You're back to this." I'm like, "Well, you got to do what you got to do. You got to get in the trenches in any way you can."
100%.
Yeah.
Well, impressive story. And you're now a partner in the Gary Roberts High Performance Program. And it's evolved so much since those early days. Maybe take us through a little bit the evolution of that program and ultimately where you guys are at today.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm so proud of what we've created as a team. We've actually been, I refer to it as like a family business because it really has been in a lot of ways. Adrian and I joke, and we'll talk about that, but Adrian and I joke that we're in a 3-person marriage all the time because Gary, I met my husband at work and we were the original people, and now we're partners with Gary, which is great. But yeah, it evolved from several different locations to seasonal business to I actually had my own business and did my own thing, as well as Adrian was professionally fighting at the time. So we had different things going on for a lot of years. And we would rent out St. Andrew's College to do our high performance off-season training program. So it was basically a seasonal 3 to 4 month business that trained high performance hockey players as well as worked on their nutrition, and it wasn't a year long thing. It was in the beginning, but then it evolved now where we opened a new facility just this past spring, and now we have the opportunity to train everybody and work with an adult program as well as a lot of different youth programs, in-season programs. So yeah, we're very excited about the opportunity to get into a space year round. So it's been a long time coming.
Well, it truly is a world-class facility, and you guys offer a world-class program. I've been so proud of the partnership that Impact and you guys, we've formed over these last 5+ years. And I have to tell you a story I don't think I've told you before, but if you remember, you called, this is at the beginning of COVID, and needed a food option. And I often try not to get too high on my horse or excited, but it was a true, like, cool entrepreneurship moment for me because I was on the dock of our family's cottage when you made that call, and I was so excited to get it. I said, yes, we're going to do this, which I didn't know if we could do. And then I called my partners, Brett and Alex, and I told them about the opportunity. I'm like, guys, I know we're not ready for this, but we need to do this. And so we definitely wanted to make it happen. And that first year or two was a little chaotic, but we've formed this
COVID wasn't chaotic.
But we've formed this awesome partnership now that's been great for Impact. Hopefully we've helped with your program.
Absolutely.
But I want to ask you, because I know you were a customer at Impact before, what about our food philosophy and how we approach food, originally made you think of us when you needed that food option?
Yeah. So I love, as we talked about, real food and real ingredients. So, the number one thing I think of when I think of Impact is eat real food. And that is actually our first pillar in our nutrition principles is eat real food. And then we have our health, focus on health, focus on performance, and then we look at supplements. So, when I looked at the pillar that we care about most, it's eat real food. And I was a OG customer at Impact at King Street. So I knew that we wanted simplicity. I know that we needed something that was going to fuel our athletes in a way that I would support. We had to work with obviously portion sizes and all those things and develop something that I'm so proud of what we've developed up to this point. But yeah, it started with just like eat real food. Yeah. And like we couldn't follow that more. And yeah, those principles. And then obviously, getting to know you in the community, and like I met most of my best friends for lunch there often, as you know, they still come in. Yeah. I moved up north in the city, but yeah, I really I was attracted to that community aspect. And then also just the fact that like, I always knew what you would get, and it was simple and it was good ingredients and it was food that could fuel performance.
I remember the first time you brought Gary in and him grilling me on the ingredients in every single menu item from the baked goods to the dressings to where the protein came from. And I remember him, he's a hard guy to impress. And this is our first interaction and kind of answering, yeah, we no refined sugars, no seed oils. And he'd be like, okay. Okay. And then the next thing I look over and he's got like a tray of baked goods in front of him and he's eating all the baked goods. And, that's kind of now evolved into these annual tastings we do, which are some of my funnest moments of collaborating with you and Gary and Adrian on the upcoming menu. A question I have for you, which I'm always so impressed in how you think about this, is you have to fuel these world-class athletes that are, young men and women. And you also have to think about flavor and taste because they won't eat food that doesn't taste amazing. When you come to these tastings and when you're thinking even at a higher picture of the program, how do you think about the food as fuel and then food as something that tastes great that people are going to eat?
Yeah, I think that's, if I can get that across to an athlete that healthy food can taste good through, obviously the partnership with Impact, like I've definitely won. And with the feedback, especially from this past summer, like we definitely achieved that, which is amazing because you don't want to eat boiled chicken and broccoli and brown rice forever and think that that's what healthy food should taste like. It should taste good. And there's so many ingredients out there that can make it taste good. So yeah, I think one of the big thing is like, yes, we look at quantity. Quantity is so important for athletes. And so, obviously we have to dial in the quantity, but the quality is equally as important in making sure that, obviously the ingredients are going to match that. So yeah, when we think about, I still don't have my royalties for the poke bowl, but we'll talk about that. When we talked about, originally, creating this menu together, I think one of the big things is identifying, okay, what are the athletes eating already and how can we elevate that and make it healthy and make it, fit into this fuel philosophy that we have to make sure they're eating enough, but also getting in not only just the macros, but all the micronutrients that they need. So when we looked at that, we looked at, okay, the poke bowl, for example, like they were eating those things out. And I would ask them all the time, about what they're eating, where they eat out, steakhouses, if they were to grab a, lunch, where would they go? What are the options? So that's where a lot of the ideas for peer-to-peer chicken and the poke bowl and, Greek, like those places that they're getting fast food anyway, just elevate it and make it healthy and make it good. And then also just hit the numbers that you need. And how can we add as much micronutrients, as many micronutrients as we possibly can?
Yeah, we'll sneak them in there. They don't need to know.
Every way. Yeah.
So you not only coach world-class athletes, you also coach executives, everyday people. In your time working with these different populations, what are the similarities and then what are the differences, say, from working with an elite hockey player to, an executive that you're coaching at your facility?
Yeah, at the end of the day, they are very similar. And so why I say this is they all have a different stressor or major stressors that are contributing to something that could be affecting their health, right? So when we look at athletes, the majority of that stress is coming from physical stress. So if you think about them training, 2 to 4 hours a day, under recovering, that's going to have a huge impact on not only their performance, but obviously their health, right? So, when I look at an athlete, we're dealing with the physical stress, obviously mental, emotional as well. But the majority of that stress is coming that they have to recover from is coming from physical. And then when I look at an executive or, a busy mom, whoever it is, the stress might be coming from other areas. They're still doing the physical stress probably because a lot of my clients are training in some way. But it's still a stressor. So how I approach it is looking at, okay, how do we have all these stressors? And stressors can show up, internally, externally, in a lot of different ways. So that's why even getting like diagnostics and data, so things like blood work and, understanding, where those stressors are coming from and then identifying them in the beginning. So big data collection and then making sure that we can have a path for them that's going to help them perform at whatever it is they need to perform at. So whether the executive is like, mentally, I'm just not feeling there. So obviously we're looking further into brain health, what micronutrients he might need to boost. And then also we might do some, like I said, data collection to see exactly what we need to do for that individual. And then from an athlete's perspective, if their goal is in season and they need to perform, well, health doesn't always mean performance. And I think that is something that gets lost, where people are like, these are the healthiest individuals, they're athletes. No, that's a very stressful situation. And when they're in the middle of the playoffs, like, that is not health. It doesn't mean that they can't be a healthy individual long term and that we can work on things like that. But acutely, that's a very stressful, demanding state that they're in. So, mitigating that stress, however it's showing up, is the biggest thing we start with. So yeah, identifying stressors in the beginning, coming up with a strategy for that individual based on what their personal goal is. And then also, kind of separating it and being like, as a coach, what do I think they need to work on? So you indirectly try to work on that, but also, identify that they are going to have goals of their own and that you are going to have to meet them where they're at.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Now, I remember being a nutrition coach and trainer, nowhere near at your level, but buy-in was one of the things that I found challenging sometimes. For you, whether it's a professional athlete or not, how do you coach buy-in in, say, those early consultations?
Yeah, it's definitely very difficult these days with the amount of information we have out there. But buy-in, I think it comes down to education and always making the connection between food and recovery and training and performance. So, the individuals I work with really care about performance. Whatever that performance looks like I said, whether it's showing up for their kids, whether it's showing up at their work, or showing up in their sport and being the best they possibly can be. So whatever they're performing at, making that connection between, like, example, the brain health client executive who wants to improve their, like, feels foggy or whatever it is, making the connection between, if we eat these foods, or these foods could be causing some of that brain fog, or these habits, then how can we connect that to performance so that it's something they really care about and understand the why. So if they don't understand the why, and this is the same with the youth athletes I work with, as hard as that is, and I just get blank stares sometimes about the nutrition education that I'm talking to them about eating their vegetables, they're like, okay, we get it. But it's making that connection. Like, if you eat your vegetables, it will help you perform in these ways. Like, if you eat greens, it is going to be a massive source of B vitamins. B vitamins are how you develop energy in your body. So things like that, where it's directly making that connection to something they care about. And so that's what, understanding what that thing is that they really care about and what performance means to them. Because it's different even for every individual athlete I work with, what performance looks like.
Well, I love that you said that. And I actually remember a time watching you give us talk to maybe 15, 16-year-old boys, a rep hockey team. And I was curious in how you'd approach the talk. But you did exactly as you just said. And I was watching the room, and you could see these kids, have some light bulbs go off in their head. And you're like, oh, like, my slap shot will get better, or I'll get faster if I focus on these things. And you could really see, I'm sure some of them weren't listening and still eat McDonald's to this day. But
You're not going to get them all,
I think some of them probably, had that moment where they're like, okay, I need to focus on this a little bit more. And, as a coach, that's all you can
That's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
And, to not attach yourself with the outcome for them. At the end of the day, your job, my job is to educate and inspire and coach. I can't eat for them, and I can't make the decisions for them. I can't go to bed earlier for them. I can't, live their life. They have to choose to do that, and they have to care in order to do that. So it's like, as much as and I used to really attach myself with the outcome, and I think every coach does.
Yes.
Because it's very difficult when you're putting in all the effort on your side and you don't see the results on the other side. But you just can't get attached to it because, again, everyone's their individual. They're going to make their choices, and you just have to be there to guide them and educate them. And yeah, I've had athletes that, I've worked with for years, and then they have a major injury, and it's like, that's when they want to listen to me. And it's like, okay, well, that was your thing that, that clicked. But yeah. And you don't want it to be one of those things, but with adversity comes growth. And so I think a lot of the time those major, especially for my personal background, like, those major moments are the moments when you're like, this is what's important. This is what I need to focus on.
No, absolutely. All right. Shifting gears a little bit. You mentioned Adrian, your husband, earlier. Another inspiring human being now leads the strength and conditioning part of the Gary Roberts program. I'm curious, you guys have had so much happen in your life recently. You've created a young family, 2 kids, you're business partners. You guys have got a new facility now and are probably thinking bigger, longer term than you ever have before. How have you guys found balance between a work life and a personal life? And also, like, how is it working with your spouse?
Is there balance? I don't know.
I
I
don't
think that's
know.
the big question.
Yeah.
To be honest, we're still figuring it out. Like, I think that will constantly be a journey. We're both very career-driven individuals, and for me personally, it's been very difficult, like taking time off to be a mom. As amazing as it is, it's been very difficult because I was focused so much on my career, and Adrian and I, that's how we met. We don't know any different. So when people say, "How do you work with your spouse?" It's like we met at work. We don't know any different. So yeah, it's definitely challenging at times. We have to have boundaries because otherwise it's, we can be, 8:30 at night just talking about whatever with work and have to shut it off. But also I think that because we don't know anything different, I don't know if there's anything wrong with like constantly, talking about things that we're passionate about. I used to think we have to have these like serious boundaries, and in some ways we do, and especially around the kids. But when it's just us, like we want to talk about business, and that's what we're excited about right now because we have these great opportunities. So that's why I'm like, I don't know. I think it's just priorities. I don't know if it's balance. It's just where you put your priorities. And for us, like, we don't really have a social life right now. Our life is building our kids and family and building the business. And so, and for me coming back, like I just came back to work in the spring, basically. So I was off on, with the kids doing my thing as a new mom and feeling like I legit took time off and that I was not relevant anymore. Like I think every mom who has to go through that period can feel like, I just left this other identity and now I have to build, something after. And I think that's what's exciting. Also, very scary now is like finding that way to have family time and then also build a business and the amount of time that's required. I mean, to build a business and to do what we want to do with GRP, it's a lot. But it's also what we thrive off of. So
yeah, no, I love that. And I agree. I don't know if balance is the right word. I think priorities is a good word, which you said.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the great things for both of us is when you find that passion and that purpose in what you're doing, you're going to want to talk about it. And for you guys living under the same roof, 8:30 p.m. is probably a great time after the kids are down to talk about something exciting that's happening at work.
Totally.
So I totally get that, and I think it's a great approach.
Yeah, and with the kids, it's like they're gonna be around the conversations and all of that, but we obviously want to keep a fun environment for them and have them involved. Like I was just telling you a story about how my daughter like asked to come to the gym with us, and that's cool. So creating that environment, and obviously, it is what we know and what we've built. And I'm excited to just be back in the mix, to be honest, and not talking about like, how many bowel movements my son had or whatever.
I
talk about how many bowel movements my other clients have. Exactly. Yeah. The conversation is actually pretty similar.
Pretty similar.
And I actually coach a lot of the ways that actually my daughter last night, I was trying to get her to eat her chicken on her plate. She's like a red meat, which is great. Like she loves red meat. She loves ribs. Like she can eat like half a rack of ribs. But I was trying to get her protein, and I try to educate obviously what I do for a living. Talk about food positively and how it can fuel you. And so we talk about protein and muscles. And so she goes, "Mommy, I don't need to eat my chicken. I already have muscles." And I was like, "Oh, you just stumped me a little bit there." Nice. I was like, "Well, honey." And then I was like, "How do I explain this to a 3-year-old?" And then I had a coaching moment that I was like, this is how I should probably explain it to everybody.
To a 25-year-old.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I was like, it's whether they're 3 and not eating their chicken and whether they're 25 and playing the NHL. I mean, the conversation's still pretty similar.
No, you're right. Okay, I want to keep your coaching hat on right now. And I want to throw some case studies at you. And let's get into the weeds a little bit. Mm-hmm. Okay, so first case study, we have a 40-year-old woman with 2 kids as a busy professional. She does F45 3 times a week, tries to eat healthy, but doesn't really know how. Her goals are to lose 20 pounds, improve her body composition, gain muscle, and have more energy. Take us through the day 1 through 90.
All right. Wow, really throwing them at me.
Let's go.
Okay. So the number one thing, I'll start with the 3 A's. So this is a coaching philosophy that I have in our business, and it's starting with awareness is the number one thing. So this means awareness of where they're currently at. So you just gave me the background, but I want to know more information. So comprehensive intake process. So that goes with obviously questionnaire, understanding what exactly her diet looks like. So, whether it is tracking, whether it's just, having conversation to get into a lot of details about the amounts or taking pictures, whatever it is, there's so many different ways, and we could talk about that after, but to understand exactly what that looks like. So bringing awareness to the current habits as well. So, sleep, lifestyle, stress, like what does all of that look like through, again, that intake and that conversation in the beginning. So awareness also, this could be, getting blood work, getting certain tests done. So like data collection and awareness is number one. The second thing we do is add the good. So what I mean by that is a lot of the conversation has been focused on restriction in nutrition. So what do I need to cut out? And so, especially when it comes to performance, usually it's what you need to add in. Actually, 100% of the time, it's what you need to add into your diet. So what I mean by that is, does she need more water? Does she need more protein? She probably needs some more calories by the sounds of it. A lot of people underfuel and they're just not even aware of it, right? So understanding what we need to add in, adding in more green vegetables, adding in more micronutrients, polyphenol-rich foods, whatever it is that I see from that data collection that we need to add in. And then the third thing is assess. So, when I make an original plan, it's constantly being assessed and constantly being coached and given feedback, and we adjust it as we go. So if I look at that 40-year-old female who's, momming and doing all the things, it's like, okay, how can we, again, identify those stressors and get the awareness piece? How can we add into your diet and create habits that are going to be sustainable and make you feel empowered so that you can lose that 20 pounds? And so when it comes to weight loss, a lot of it is, again, habit building in the beginning, understanding like exactly how much, and then what does body composition mean? Like, when we're looking at how are we tracking that? So is she getting her body composition done, or is she just saying that because it's, what we say these days instead of weight loss, which is important. It's, obviously building and maintaining muscle mass and decreasing your body fat and having a good ratio of that. So it's starting off with understanding where she's at and then assessing to see, okay, once we make this original plan, how do we assess to see if it's working? So a lot of the time, looking at those general habits, what health pillar do we need to focus on? So, energy, for example, would be a big one. I'm sure with little kids, I feel that all the time. Is there a time you're not going to be tired? And I still don't think the answer is yes, but understanding again, how can we improve our health in the beginning? Because with health comes performance, and performance, things like body composition is a measure of performance in a certain way, right? So, if that's what she's looking at and it's going to help her perform in her everyday life, then we will help her achieve that.
Okay, great. Well, it's very
Okay.
good. Now I want to dig into a question that could be for anybody, but we'll stick on her. That idea of gaining muscle and losing, let's say, body composition at the same time.
Yeah.
Like that's probably a common request. Everyone, including me, would love to do that.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think about that? Let's say for this woman here.
Yeah. A lot of it comes down to background and experience with things like lifting weights and your nutrition habits. So a beginner will absolutely be able to gain muscle and burn fat easier than someone who is way more advanced with it. And so our bodies typically don't want to be doing a lot of different things at once. But when you're a beginner and you start on a health journey, like your results are great, because you started from not doing it, right?
Yeah.
So and that's why a lot of studies are on untrained individuals. When you look at the results that they have, and those, the information is sometimes a little misleading for people who do train and have those consistent habits and are looking for that body composition change in the end. So a lot of the times, we do want to separate it. So going into like a hypertrophy phase, for example, a muscle growth phase, and then focusing on, more body composition and dealing with that. For example, like with hockey players, a lot of it will change in like August when they're getting ready to go into their seasons because they're skating more. So their body composition will balance out a little bit, even if they've gained some weight and gained some muscle in the summer. But for them, it is a bit harder to do it both at the exact same time, right?
Yeah.
And strength and muscle mass are not the same thing as well. So people think they will go hand in hand. You'll gain some strength with muscle mass, but you do want to focus on, obviously, what is the goal at so yes, you can do both, but I would say it's harder for trained individuals. I think doing it in phases, and that's why, again, the coaching I do is at least 3 months of coaching, because a lot of people do want to do that. And we need time to go through different phases. And also you need time to build healthy habits. If you just want to go on a crash, deficit, then go for it. You'll see results in the beginning, but a lot of the time that's not sustainable for people.
It's interesting you talked about the 3 months there, because even that,
Sure.
probably isn't a lot of time in the big picture. Let's just stay on this woman here who wants to lose 20 pounds. I'm sure when you're coaching somebody, that would be an aggressive amount of weight to lose in 3 months. Like, how do you approach that when a client comes to you and they've got these really ambitious goals, and you have to balance, creating some early success to gain excitement and buy-in, but it would be ideal to take 6 months to a year if they're trying to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. Like, how do you coach that on maybe more about expectations of results?
Yeah, I mean, I'm straight up at this point in my career. Like, I don't love the marketing that's like, this 6 weeks to your unrecognizable body or whatever it is. It's like, if you are starting from scratch and you're trying to develop these habits and, going through a wellness journey, it's going to take a long time, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm straight up about mapping out. So what I do, I use, again, my principles from strength and conditioning. So in strength and conditioning with an athlete, you look at the entire year, and that's your major macro cycle. So in periodization, you have different phases. You have your in-season, you have your off-season, and then you have transitionary periods between those two. And so with executives or even this client, we look at, okay, do you have big events or stressful things coming up? And so kind of look at it as in-season, off-seasons with them as well. And so mapping out, okay, if you want to lose 20 pounds, and I go through the science, I go through the background of what that would actually look like if they were to change their body composition sustainably. So 20 pounds, for example, we're looking at least 6 months to a year. 6 months would be a rapid change, and that's probably not going to be sustainable. So mapping out the entire year through different phases. So the first 3 months is foundations and habit building. And people don't love to hear that. That's not exciting stuff, right? But I think there's so much noise out there that if they're expecting that, I just say this isn't the program for you then. Athletes don't build 20 pounds of muscle in one summer. Steven Stamkos started with us when he was 18 years old. This is, Gary's first client. He has taken years. He's 35 years old right now and still excelling in his career. Like, he took years to put muscle mass on, and it is his job to be an athlete and, use his body and train. Right. So, using those examples from sports and the athletes that we've worked with, like, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in one summer. When we get these 14-year-olds coming in and they're like, our son needs to gain 20 pounds this summer. I said, well, it's not going to happen this summer. It's a buildup. And so if you develop even great habits in your first summer with us, great. Let's translate that into in-season and to next year. And so I do the same thing with every client that comes in. We map out the year, realistically, how long it's going to take based on physiology, because, and you can do things that are going to speed up that process. But at the end of the day, building sustainable habits are the thing that's going to be your rock and make sure that when there are those stressful times and tricky times that you are able to rely on those things.
Okay, I think you might have answered my second case study that, but I'm still going to ask it anyway. So we've got now a 16-year-old boy who's an elite hockey player and wants to gain 15 pounds. And he trains at Gary Roberts High Performance, has access to Sylvie and Adrian and the entire team. How are you coaching this 16-year-old coming in?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is, like, when they're 16, like, education is key. And so starting out with, for example, tracking their food at that time, I think is very educational tool for them to understand, like, what is a protein? What is a carbohydrate? What is a fat? How much water do I need to have? Do I need to have electrolytes? What about supplements? All these things are great to start out with that individual because they're new and they want to be at the level of the pros, right? So educating them on what that looks like to get there is very important. But also, understanding that you have to be honest with them about the process and how long it takes. And so we use the examples of, Steven Stamkos and Connor McDavid and all those amazing athletes that we work with because it took years for them to get to that point. They didn't do it in one summer. And they also consistently do these things throughout the year as well. So it's not just us and our training in the summer. It's, a joint effort and they're the ones doing it. Right. So yeah, starting with education using, and I think for them, like understanding, like what does 4,000 calories look like? Mm-hmm. And I know, the calorie thing has been a hot topic in nutrition forever. But at the end of the day, it's data. It's a point in which you can see whether an athlete is under eating or overeating. You don't have to look at it forever. And I think that that's where you earn, intuition, intuitive eating, and understanding what a well-balanced plate looks like. There's a lot of ways that we can do this. And I do it depending on who's in front of me. But for the young athlete who's like data-driven, wants to know like, how much should I be eating? Yeah, we go over what that looks like. Because a lot of them are under eating. They have no idea that 1,000 extra calories they burn playing pickleball or whatever they're doing outside of training, that it is going to impact their performance on the ice, right? So it's all education and just understanding that we look at like total energy expenditure versus energy intake. We educate on things like micronutrients and macronutrients and understanding that this is what a plate should look like. This is what your post-workout plate should look like. And like I said, building habits in that crucial age is everything.
Perfect answer. Okay, last case study. We have a 25-year-old female who's a runner. She's always injured, always tired, no nutritional strategy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can relate to this. Always injured. The first thing you would want to look at with this individual is that health pillar of immune system. So you are only as good, you can only recover as good as your immune system is healthy. So, when you have surgery, when you're ill, like you have an illness, everything comes from your immune system and how you're able to recover. So the first thing that I would look at for this individual is probably under eating, which can lead to immune suppression. Not understanding the micronutrients, even the macronutrients that they need in order to, perform as a runner. And then also looking at, the pillars of like skeletal muscle and like strength training, as well as lifestyle and recovery and the other stressors in her life. So yeah, the first thing, obviously we talked about the pillar of like real food. Then I look at what is the health area that's holding them back. And if someone's injured all the time, their immune system, I would bet that she's probably sick a lot of the time as well. There's that connection, or just constantly getting injured. She's not able to recover. So where is that coming from? The strength of her immune system.
Well, I love the consistency in all your answers. And You're so right about how you coach a professional athlete to an everyday person. The principles are all the same, which are so cool. Okay, Sylvie, how has your nutritional approach evolved over the years from your 20s to your 30s? What's the day in the life of Sylvie look like right now? And how do you view nutrition?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely evolved over time. Like in my 20s, as I mentioned, there was a lot of restriction and, just thinking that always eat less. And even in nutrition school, like I tried every diet there was out there just to see. I mean, I still do those experiments. I don't do them as much because I'm like, why? I don't need to go on the carnivore diet. Like I don't, for my lifestyle and what I'm doing right now, I don't see the benefits of it. So, I think in my 20s, there was a lot of experimenting, a lot of restriction in my early 20s, just based off being an athlete and not understanding fuel. And that's really where, again, this all started, is my passion for understanding fuel. And so in my 30s, I mean, I've gone through so many different stages in my nutrition. Obviously the big one being motherhood and eating, basically having a swing of 45 pounds weight gain each time within 18 months. That was intense. So I have had to, have some restriction and do some tracking and those types of things. But like I said, I'm data driven. It wasn't like I didn't feel restricted because of all the work I've done and the coaching that I do with athletes and understanding that this is data. This is what I need to look at. So yeah, I have gone through. I don't do that every day, and I think again, intuition is earned in those areas. But if you do have certain goals, which I had heavy goals to, like I said, when you gain 45 pounds in each pregnancy in 18 months, like difference, yeah, it's tough. Your body goes through a lot, especially because all I knew was strength training and nutrition before this was my life, right? And so I never had, aside from injuries, like had to do that. So now it just looks like nourishing myself in a way that, feels good to support my training. I want to train hard. I want to be able to, get back my 300-pound deadlift and, not get back, I would say like be a new version of myself as a mom. Yeah, my nutrition journey has changed a lot, but I think that the big things remain the same. I eat real foods. I prioritize protein and a ton of micronutrients, and I eat carbs, and I love carbs, especially around workouts. Like the research is there. It's amazing for obviously, stress response, your immune system, like you name it, carbohydrates, especially around training, like the research is there. You need to do it. So, do you want like a specific day?
No,
Okay.
I love it.
I was like, I can run through a day, but I always find
great.
those what I eat in a day. It's like, okay, well, it depends on your goal, your individual, like,
No, I think that, the takeaway for me is hearing like, your daughter and your son, the inspiration that you're going to show them just by trying to eat healthy, trying to be better, they'll pick up those habits, and we talked before about seeing kids just all of a sudden pick up little things that you're doing. For me, I've noticed with my kids being a bit older than yours is, they are talking about protein, they're talking about things like that. And, my daughter mentions like, we got these Paleo Valley pepperoni sticks. She's like, oh, it's extra protein in my lunch. So it's pretty cool that they just pick up on that stuff. Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears here, supplements.
Yes.
Hot topic. I have to admit guiltily, I fall for Instagram ads all the day. Most recently, I bought the David Beckham IM8 stack.
Oh, how do you like it?
Well, the marketing is amazing. The packaging is sexy, and it tastes great. Now, I don't know if it does anything, but I buy a lot of supplements. My wife wants to kill me because our cupboard above our sink is full of
supplement cupboard.
everything I order impulse buy. So when it comes to supplements, what are your overall thoughts, and how do you incorporate them in how you coach your clientele?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, to get back, I love like principles and pillars and all those things. So to get back like to, how I coach athletes, as I get asked about, the number one question I get asked about is creatine, which I love to answer and I love to talk about. But first, again, are they eating real food? What health pillar are we focus on? Are they doing the performance nutrition things that they need to do? So eating pre-post workout, focusing on hydration. Then we look at supplements. So supplements is the very top of the pyramid. And yes, it's important. And I absolutely think it plays a role in pretty much everybody's day to day, but the supplement industry is not regulated. So you get a lot of different claims and a lot of things that are on labels that just might not be true. And what's in them might not actually be in them if they're not third-party tested. So especially for athletes, there's, a testing protocol that, they need to abide by because there can be banned substances in those. So making sure that whatever products you are taking are third-party tested so that what's in them is actually in them. Because otherwise, the amount of claims that can be out there and the marketing and all these things, like it gets out of hand. And it's hard. I mean, even as a nutrition principal, I want to fall for things sometimes. And then I do further research and look into it. And, again, everything should be targeted. So my term for supplementation is targeted supplementation. So it should be targeted to what your goal is, what phase you're in. And again, why are you taking this? So, we live in a world where you could literally be on, 100 pills a day and think that you're, doing all these things, and you might be not getting very many benefits from all those pills you're taking, but spending a ton of money, right? So I think that it needs to be targeted towards what your goal is. And so, for example, I think there's some foundational ones that most people should take. I think
Tell us more.
Protein powder, little plug there, protein powder, is incredibly important. So quality protein powder that again is tested. And then a multivitamin, usually most people can benefit from taking a multivitamin, again, a quality version. Omega-3s, I think most people do not get enough omega-3s. Vitamin D, as well as magnesium. So those would be, especially vitamin D in Canada. But again, with blood work makes a huge difference. So targeting those areas, magnesium typically is one that you will see most people will benefit from. So foundationally, kind of look at those originally. If someone were to say, what would you just recommend without seeing any blood work or without, targeting it towards an individual? And I didn't know anything about them. I think most people can benefit from. Then creatine would be the other one that I think most people can benefit. I was at a family dinner recently and someone, just started grilling me about creatine for women in their 50s and 60s. And, hey, the research is starting to come out about all these things, which is super exciting. But again, it needs to be targeted. I always ask, well, what's the goal? What's the goal in taking that?
Very practical of you, Sylvie. People just want to know the exciting stuff.
I know. But, and I think it's all very exciting, supplements, like I said, we were talking about, organ supplements, organ meat supplements and, NMN and like these things that are very exciting to research. There's a new longevity one that I heard about recently that I'm like, I'm going to take that one. So I have no affiliation with the company. I just trust their other products and they're certified. But I think it's very exciting. But again, it's like, what is the goal at that time? And then also you should cycle them and make sure that if you're in a hypertrophy phase, and that's your goal right now is to put on muscle mass, let's focus on, things that are going to support your gut health that are going to help you put on muscle mass. So, and those are indirect that are going to help you put on muscle mass. But if you have good gut health, it'll absolutely help you with obviously being able to put on size and muscle. So again, targeted to what the goal is and then phasing them. So it's like, I get asked, can I take this yet? Can I take this yet? It's like, be patient. We'll get there. We have these other things that we're focusing on first.
I'm also a big sucker for biohacking, especially I love a good podcast about the latest and greatest biohacking tools.
Yeah.
I'm curious, in the world of professional sports, how prevalent are some of these biohacking tools and how do you go about coaching those if an athlete wants to, be a biohacker?
Very hot topic right now. I think when it comes to an athlete, a lot of things are new that maybe they can't do yet. And what I mean by that is some things need to be tested in order for it to be safe for an athlete. Things like red light therapy, that's obviously something they can just do. Sauna, cold tub, all of that. That's not biohacking at this point. This is just part of recovery tools. But yeah, I guess it's looking at what the therapy is and then are they doing the basics first? I think that's one of the big things that we get lost in the weeds about biohacking is you can't biohack, good sustainable habits. And I know this sounds so boring of me, but I've really tried to, be that consistent voice. And that's why they call me the gym mom because I'm always momming them about, are you doing these basic things first? Then I'm not talking to you about that supplement. I'm obviously being aggressive about that, but I think it's looking at the tool. Athletes absolutely use them. If we're talking about high level stuff, they're doing it. Whether or not it's a part of their daily routine yet, there's a lot of exciting things out there that I think have a place. Absolutely. But again, it's what's the goal of the whatever therapeutic.
Okay, I hear you.
Whatever you're using, I know. Give me an example. What's a biohacking thing that you are excited about?
Well, I like listening to the most extreme biohacks from, blood transfusions, peptides, stem cells, things that I'm not personally ready to try, but I like hearing stories about people that do try it. I give them credit for being, there's
if the stem
Brian
cells,
Johnson, the guy who spends $2 million a year on his wellness.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ever be that guy, but it's interesting. And I think it's cool what he's trying, for at least to learn from.
I think this term biohacking is so overused at this point because it's at the end of the day, that guy, he's doing everything, but he still needs to do the basics.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point.
And, sleep, you can't replace
doing
sleep.
The basics. And to his credit, he probably markets sleep as the number one pillar in his
Exactly.
wellness
Yeah, I was gonna
routine.
say, isn't he like all over? And yes, ways to optimize your sleep. Like obviously,
Yeah,
all these tools to optimize your sleep. Which, like again, I'm all for because if there's one like you can only recover as well as you sleep, right? So it's like it definitely is the number one thing. And if there's a million things that you can do to help with
yeah,
sleep, then go at it. Yeah, I just think we've got lost in the weeds of like yeah, kind of majoring in the minors with that stuff.
for
It's
sure.
like
I remind myself on a monthly basis to master the basics
yeah.
before I let my brain go into
Yeah, but like if the stem
going
cells
to
can
Costa
save
Rica to
us
get stem
and
cells and
yeah, we can
stuff like that.
like, live to be 150, like I'm all for it.
All right, staying on hot topics, I feel like a nutrition talk can't happen without GLP-1s. So for this conversation, you have a new client whose doctor has prescribed them a GLP-1. How are you coaching this individual?
Yeah, so I mean, pharmaceuticals have their place, like GLPs have their place. They, anything anyone wants to do to help their health journey, I'm all for whatever it is that they think. I think what gets hard with GLPs is just building sustainable habits. So they will help you in appetite suppression. That's their goal in the beginning. And so that means that obviously if you're training hard or, you are an active individual, that becomes very difficult to not be fueling enough, right? So the number one thing I would look at with that individual is just like, okay, you're on it. You want to be on it for set reasons to kickstart a weight loss journey or whatever it is. But we want to look at, again, training and skeletal muscle long term. Like skeletal muscle is literally connected to every health measure there is in terms of longevity. Like when we look at being fragile, it comes down to the health of your skeletal muscle. And I know, we've heard this conversation over and over again with protein and strength training, but I mean, it's not wrong. It's just more people are talking about it now. So, looking at if you want to build sustainable habits long term, and when you go off of them, if you want to go off of them, how do you develop these habits that, are going to help with your hunger cues and make sure that it's not, you're, totally adjusting to just restricting your eating. And so building those sustainable habits, strength training, recovery principles, and then just good nutrition habits as well. So like how do we incorporate protein and micronutrients and a well-balanced plate while not feeling like you want to eat? And so although it's difficult and, I'm not a doctor or someone to tell anyone to go off of anything, and I never approach any conversation when people are on pharmaceuticals about that because it's their individual journey and what they want to do. But I'm all for working hard to build sustainable habits. I think you need to put in work if you want to have something long-term in general.
Nice. I agree. Okay. So at Impact Kitchen, we opened with a food philosophy and, I've really built our brand around having this food philosophy and, we don't count calories at Impact and talk a lot about eating real food as the pillar of our brand. How do you think about calories, macros when you're coaching people versus the conversation of just eat real food? Because I know there is a bit of a balance there. So
Yeah.
how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think we've gotten in this like this versus conversation a lot with food and like food is not just fuel. It's like obviously culture, background, connection. Like there's so many different reasons we eat and in ways that we eat, right? So when I talk about fuel, obviously working with athletes, like a lot of it is about fuel. And a lot of that comes down to timing. And so calories matter, macros matter, and eating real food matters. It's not one versus the other, right? So in my conversation, as I mentioned with athletes, like understanding what 4,000 calories, it could be the difference in performing and not performing if they're under eating 1,000 calories. It doesn't mean they need to track every single thing when they're in season or track forever. I think just understanding and using it as a tool to say, calorie is a measurement of our food. It's how we know how much we're taking in from a quantity perspective. And if you look at it like that and educate around that and empower athletes to just, okay, I need to eat enough and this is what eating enough looks like and this was what a plate looks like. There's different ways we can do it. So I absolutely have conversations, about eating 4,000 calories without talking about 4,000 calories. So it just depends on the person. But I'm also all for someone who wants to, do 3 months of tracking hardcore in the summer, see exactly what they're doing, get 3 months of data on, patterns. I love that stuff. I think it's amazing because I, for one, love that as well. So, for myself, and I love blood work, I love testing, I love data in general. So that's why I think we can't, separate these things in terms of macronutrients. Like, absolutely, education around macronutrients is so important. And we've got obsessed with protein later, but what about carbohydrates, especially when it comes to athletes, and fiber, and the most important thing, micronutrients. Like, micronutrients are really what fuels performance. When you think about it, it's those micronutrients that are helping, in all areas of performance. So, having those conversations and, again, educating is so important. And I don't think we need to isolate. It's just like when we cut out food groups, like, we're just going to cut out carbohydrates or cut out fats. Like, we've been there, we've done that. We don't need to do this anymore. We can look at it as education and just biochemistry. And I know that's a very matter of fact way, but I have a lot of really direct clients, and I am direct about, again, understanding the person in front of me and trying to educate them in the best way that I can. That food can be so much more than that.
Awesome. I love it. Okay, Sylvie, next up we have our impact community questions.
Okay.
So these have been sent in to us, and these are rapid fire, but take your time where you feel like you need to. Okay. All right. First one, pizza or burgers?
Oh, burger.
Okay. Kettlebells or dumbbells?
Kettlebells.
Nice. What's one challenge you've had to overcome recently?
I mean, the biggest challenge I've had to overcome recently has been becoming a mother and understanding and adjusting to wanting a career at the same time. I'm still going through it. I think a lot of women don't talk about it postpartum, and just like this identity that you lose. And I was so wrapped up in one thing that I really did realize is I was so wrapped up in my career and my identity pre-kids. And I thought I could just meld them perfectly. And that's just not a thing. And I think a lot of us go to think, I'm just going to do, and I'm coming back, and I'm starting to understand it. But like I said in the earlier conversation, priorities and just things have shifted in terms of but that's been my biggest challenge recently.
Great. All right. Your all-time favorite menu at Impact Kitchen? Menu item.
Okay. This is so tough. I mean, can I say the chocolate sea salt cookie?
That's fair. That's a good one.
Like, literally my favorite. I can't believe I didn't get one today.
Okay. Okay. Have you ever been starstruck with any of your clients?
No, I know that sounds funny, but I mean, I liked hockey growing up. But yeah, I think like, even someone like Connor McDavid, like I've known him since he was 14. Like he's an amazing individual in all ways, and I can't say enough great things about him. But yeah, I think just like seeing them as humans and like, understanding that they have very similar challenges that we have. I wouldn't say I get very starstruck. I mean, if The Rock came in, I would be like, yeah, but I have not met The Rock yet.
All right, Rock, if you're listening. Okay, your favorite East Coast comfort food?
Oh, definitely. Oh, it's a tie between fish and chips and lobster roll.
Nice. We got to figure out a way to get a healthy version of that on the menu.
Oh, we don't need to go healthy for that. Just go in. Just go in.
Just go for it.
Yeah.
How many grams of protein does someone need to eat in a day?
Yeah. So, I mean, the standard recommendations, if you're like an athletic individual, are like 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram. So yeah, we're looking at like around a gram per pound. So if you're 180 pounds, you probably want to eat close to that. If you're trying to be 200 pounds, you probably want to eat closer to your goal weight. This protein conversation has gotten a little insane these days. I actually have a little bit of a rant that I'm going to post on my thing. But again, like I think it's very important. I talk about protein all the time, but when you're pushing one macronutrient so much, a lot of the time it will decrease other macronutrients that are also super important, like fats and carbohydrates, for different reasons. So I think that protein's important. I think getting it from real sources as much as possible, not from your popcorn. Pour from your candy. Just saying. Or lattes. I saw that recently too.
Okay.
Like the
Yes,
protein lattes.
yes.
Not saying that there's anything wrong with that if that's what you choose. I'm just saying the pillar, and this is where we come back to real food, should be eating your steak or your salmon or whatever your preference is.
Okay. A nutrition trend you wish would go away.
Cutting out full food groups like
I hear you.
carbohydrates or fats I don't think protein's going to be vilified, but maybe.
Yeah,
We'll
we
see.
never know.
You never know.
All right, last one here. Your biggest inspiration.
My family.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say, Adrian, the kids, hands down.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, it's a good another segue here because the next question is about you have young kids, I have preteens. How do you go about feeding your kids and children in general as they're growing up?
Yeah, it's tough. I think like my biggest challenge right now is coaching my 3-year-old on, how to eat a balanced plate. But I think the big thing, and I say this, this is one of my pillars when I talk to young athletes as well, is talking about, getting involved in the process. And it can be such a small thing. It could be, helping your mom make those energy balls, getting in the kitchen and watching your dad, cook a pasta meal or whatever it is. Getting involved in the process, going grocery shopping with your parents. I think the biggest challenge we have these days with kids and nutrition is they're not connected. It's like they can get Uber Eats, everything's so convenient. Again, they're not thinking about where their food comes from, and they're not involved in the process. Like my 3-year-old, we bake together and it is a disaster. My little guy also wants to get in there and there's flour everywhere. There's eggs dropped on the floor. Like it's a disaster. And it takes way longer, 3 times the amount of time it would take me.
Yeah.
But they're involved in the process and they're having fun and they understand and they get excited that they baked that.
Yeah.
My daughter helped bake my son's birthday cake and it meant everything to her because she was like, I baked that cake. And so I think that connecting, your kids with the process and getting them involved is the biggest thing.
Last night, my son, out of the blue, asked to make pasta from scratch. And I've never made pasta from scratch in my life.
That's amazing.
But he follows a YouTuber that's a chef. And he walked upstairs. He's like, Dad, do we have flour? I'm like, I don't know. I think so. He's like, hey, I need flour, eggs, olive oil, and sea salt.
Whipping it
I'm
up.
like, okay. He literally got the fork and did the whole thing and rolled it out, cooked it. And I was making a sauce. That's what inspired him to make the pasta. And it was amazing. It was good.
That honestly warms my
It was
heart.
so good. And for his birthday, he asked for a smash burger kit. So he's caught the make food from scratch and he loves going to farmers markets. So it's cool. I love that he's into that.
Yeah. And I think he's going to translate that into adulthood and prepping for himself and understanding that this is how you prep food.
Yeah, no, it's so fun to watch.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Longevity is another big topic these days. I want to start off on the professional athlete side, more specifically on longevity in a career. How do you coach that? How do you think about that when working with these athletes and the importance of nutrition practices probably from a young age, but thinking about extending career can mean a lot for these guys. What's the conversation like between you and your athletes for longevity?
Yeah, it's everything. I think, one of the areas that I've really tried to hone in on is how do I look at this human being, not only from a performance standpoint, but again, from that health standpoint. And so if there are, that's why I love data, because if there are certain things from a health perspective that they need to work on to help with their longevity, I want to address that. It might not mean that that's going to translate directly to performance, but when you are healthy, you perform. So in the long run, it will translate to performance. But as I mentioned, those short, acute, high stressful situations of sport, like playing a hockey game at 7:30 at night when your body should be winding down and you're in major fight or flight, that's again, not health. When we look at all these, we talk about biohacking, when we talk about winding down and getting our red lights and our dim lights and everything, preparing you to recover, that's not an athlete situation. They get on a plane right after and then they're sleeping, a couple hours a night and then they play the next day. So when we talk about longevity, I'm looking at how do I support this person in if they're, from for example, metabolic panel for like their cholesterol, that type of thing is a constant sticking point. Like, how do we support that long term, so that we're looking at this individual as, a human being, not just someone who has to perform for their sport. So like I said, data is great for that because you can identify these stressors. We all have genetic predispositions to certain things. It's just that, lifestyle and how you are expressing those genes is what matters in the long run, right? So we all have them. Like, how can we support these athletes in, knowing what those health stick points are, and doing it in times like the off season where we can build up more gut health, we can build up immunity. In season, sometimes it's survival mode. And that's just the way it is. But that's why, having really good principles going into the in season and making sure that we're looking at things like immunity and gut health, and again, just supporting them from nutrition and recovery as much as you can. That's going to translate into a long life, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, and then the long life, we talk about health span for
Yeah.
people our parents' age. And so how would you go about looking at coaching somebody who's primarily thinking about health span rather than performance?
Absolutely. So I think the big thing there is still looking at those major, health pillars. How are you moving your body? How often? Are you being consistent with it? And, what does your nutrition look like? What does your recovery look like? And what are the stressors and how are you managing them? So if we look at all of those things, we can look at living a healthy life for a long time. And that's what, health span is all about. So looking at, the health of your muscle and what you're doing to move your body, because as I mentioned earlier, you feel old when you feel fragile. And with fragility comes, again, that skeletal muscle feeling like it's failing you in a lot of ways. So I think that's a really important conversation, is just training, what they're doing for training. Working on cardiovascular health is huge. I know that's got, a lot of attention, of positive and negative. But I think at the end of the day, it's obviously, like, if you look at all the studies, it is something that you have to be doing as well. You have to be working on your heart. You have to be working on your muscle, and then, doing the best you can 80% of the time and eating real food that is going to nourish you in a way. So focusing on, your macronutrients, but also, as I mentioned, the micronutrients. So as much color as you can get in. And then also it's all about timing. Like, you should enjoy pizza and wings and whatever it is that is your thing if it's a family outing. But when it comes to performance, at certain times, there's just, like, it's not going to be the best option for you to perform, right? So just looking at timing is important in those situations. And then, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing too is like mindset and connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just like how you approach health and what that looks like to you, and then connecting with others when it comes to, not feeling lonely, which I think we've talked about the studies that have come out with that, the conversation about being lonely and what that does to an individual's health.
Well, it's interesting that might be the biggest pillar.
Yeah.
We talk about all the things
Exactly.
like nutrition, sleep, exercise, but being lonely is arguably the biggest factor.
100%. And when
Yeah.
you decide, like, I think this is huge, and I deal with so many athletes and so many people with injuries or illnesses, or even just myself coming back from like postpartum, like the moment you decide that you are not capable of doing something, it's so much harder to do that, right? So like
Yeah.
that mind-body connection, I know that sounds so cliche, like it is real. Like you decide that you're old, you're going to feel old, like
Yeah,
in your body.
100%. Yeah. So Sylvie, you've got, you mentioned earlier interns, and it's cool that you have interns now. You've reached such a high level in your career, and I'm sure a lot of people look up to you for what you've achieved. When you're working with your interns and coaching them, what advice do you have for them to ultimately achieve their goals and their dreams in the health and wellness, strength and conditioning, nutrition world? How are you working with your interns now?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. Thank you so much for saying that. I've been very fortunate and I love to coach and help people with their careers. It's like a huge passion of mine. I feel like I'll do more of that later as well. But the biggest thing, I made some major mistakes in the beginning of my career, and a lot of it came back to authenticity and just not being who I was. I'm a natural introvert, and I also was the only female in a very male dominated industry, coming in. And the biggest mistake that I made was trying to be like my male counterparts
Mhm.
and coworkers, trying to, be like them and coach like them. And that's who I thought I needed to be. The moment that I decided to just be myself and like, show my empathy, show my compassion, like I became a way better coach. And I would have conversations with athletes that some of my male coaches didn't have because I mean, that's why I'm the gym mom, because I was able to truly be myself. And I do have a very like why I'm a mom today. Like I've always wanted to be a mom. I feel like I, really excel in that area. Um, in terms of, understanding and being compassionate with individuals. So I would say that being authentic and like finding their own path, like I did not take the conventional path to work with a professional sports team. I got to do that, taking an unconventional path, but because of the trust that I built with the athletes, um, they don't care about my background in terms of certifications. Not one of them has asked me, like, did you take this course? Like, they don't care. They care that I care
Yeah.
and they care that I can get them results. And that's
Mhm.
all they care about. And so when you show up and you be yourself, and I know that sounds again so cliche, um, it changed everything for me. And I lean into being an introvert. I lean into being a female and saying that it wasn't a disadvantage for me to be a female in that situation. It was actually an advantage in that situation because there was no one else that could bring that to that room.
Yeah,
So
that's so great. Great advice.
yeah, so I think like, and a lot of my interns are female. I'm not saying that I choose that every time, but yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing is like, don't go the traditional way if you don't want to, if you don't resonate with it. Find your own way and be useful.
Exactly. I know you guys have made some big changes in your future planning with a state of the art new facility. Where do you see your career going in these next 5 years and the business in general with Gary and Adrian as partners?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many exciting things happening. I was just telling you, it's like we're growing and we're growing at a really exciting pace, but also like it's kind of like your morning. Like I'm sure you feel this with like all of the locations that you build up and how much success you've had with the restaurants. Like you kind of mourn that like small family situation where it's like, so close knit. We know like there were only like 4 of us, 5 of us, and now it's growing, which is great, which means bringing on more team members and, growing a program that we haven't grown before, like our adult program and, all of our in season and making all of these connections and collaborations. So there's huge things coming. I think for us, it's, sticking to our roots and, making sure that we're doing our basics really well. So, training our nutrition philosophy and then, our recovery. And it really comes down to, you know, doing those things with all of our clients, not just our athletes, and then expanding from there and seeing where it goes.
Yeah, so cool. So exciting. Sylvie,
Mhm.
last question. How do you impact every day?
Oh, I think just showing up with purpose every day. And so, especially with little ones now, like my days look very different. So I don't necessarily get to show up for clients every day, but I'm showing up for those two and I'm their only mom. So that's, as hard as it was at first, just, being immersed in a totally different life as a mom. I think just having purpose, like, okay, this is what I'm doing right now. And I can have an impact on their life. And it doesn't matter that it's not my identity before, because they melt. And so I think I'm a different, I absolutely am a different person post babies. So I think just, yeah, having a purpose in whatever you're doing, and understanding that, yeah, it all has a role in the big picture.
Thank you, Sylvie. I learned so much today. I talked about how inspiring you are at the beginning, but it's so true. I'm grateful
Mhm.
for our relationship and our partnership. And yeah, really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for your time. I mean, that's the biggest thing you can give, right?
Thank you.